Chris from Good Roads. We are back down in the dungeon. In the last video, we made an incredibly inexpensive set of snowboard molds, and we used it to make this. This is a blank for a powder surfer. And you can see that I've already started adding some color to this, and I've made a template and traced my shape onto the board. This is going to be a super rudimentary powder surfer. There's going to be no composites. There's going to be no base material. There's going to be no bindings. It's going to be strictly a plywood powder surfer. Now what can you get out of something like that? Well, we're going to be experimenting with shapes. We're going to be experimenting with the width of the board, the general area of the board, and whether it gives you enough float over snow. We're going to be experimenting with tail shape, especially in a directional board where you're working on powder. You want to be pretty cognizant of how the back of the board is shaped and whether or not it sinks into the powder so that you don't have to constantly be pulling up on your front foot to get the nose up out of the snow. We're going to be able to experiment with foot placement. If we give it a nice long grip surface, we'll be able to shuffle our feet around to get a better idea of where bindings might go. All of this is in service of making more complicated boards later in the season, which is the plan. So this is effectively a prototype. It's a good, fast, inexpensive way to answer a lot of questions so that we don't waste a lot of time and effort trying to figure things out with builds that are more complicated. So, what do we need to do to continue with this board? Well, like I've said, I've already traced a shape onto this off a template. It's based on some existing powder surfers that I kind of just put a whole bunch of them into a single Illustrator file and came up with a profile that I liked. The important things I took away from that were the basic geometry, length, width, and most importantly, the rail shapes. Those are the ones that I really just wanted to try to get right. So what we need to do is cut that out. I'm going to continue to do some graphics work on it. This blue is a nice wash, but I want to do a little bit more. I'm going to sand everything down, make it as smooth as possible, especially on the bottom, because even though it's just wood and polyurethane, we want to make sure that that's a nice smooth surface. Round off the edges on the top, but try to keep them square on the bottom. Even though there's no metal rails in there, we still want a nice firm 90-degree angle so that we can hopefully be able to turn. We'll hit it with a coat of finish, we'll add some grip, we'll take it for a spin. And if you're wondering, there's one other thing that, at least for me, that I get out of making a board like this, and it's redemption. Made a board like this last year, couldn't really call it a powder surfer, because you couldn't really surf, because you couldn't really turn. My goal for this, the absolute bare minimum, most simple snowboard build you can tackle, I want to link turns together. So, that's the goal for the project. Let's hit it. First thing to do was to rough cut the board. I did this using a jigsaw. I wanted to get close to the line, but not right up to it so that we could refine it later in the process. Next thing I did was I grabbed the 3D printed graffiti mops that we made a couple videos back. I'll put a link to that down below. And I used those to add just a little bit more texture and interest to the graphic. Try to do something that was quick, but also interesting and fun to look at. Next I sanded the base, and then I mixed up a stain just using some hot water and some RIT dye, which is a water-soluble dye that's used for fabrics and materials that have organic fiber, and wood is organic fibers, so there you go. After that, sanded and shaped the rails. And for grip, I used some adhesive back foam that I got off of Amazon. It came in 10-inch squares. I cut some thinner strips and stacked them up towards the edges of the board to build up some concave. And then the last thing to do is to just give it a good wax. And with that, Powder Surfer prototype is done. Time to take it for a test drive. Now, the main thing that we're looking for with this bad boy is just the ability to turn. If it floats, whether you need to be placed more towards the nose or tail, but the main thing that this prototype was built to find out was whether or not we can link turns together. So let's give it a shot. All right, let's go for a toe side. First try. Look at that. Not too shabby. Much easier to start on a straight shot, not on a turn. Just a little something to get that nose up out of the snow. There we go. It works! Yes, it works. And I can't tell you how exciting it was on that first run when I made my toe side turn, realized that I had locked into the edge and that the turn was happening, and then that I had half of the hill left. And I was like, well, might as well try for a carve, let's try heel side. And I locked right in, and I was even able to slide to a stop. Such a drastic difference from the kind of rounded hull shape we had on the bottom of the board last year, and just so much more pleasant to use as well. I did a couple more runs just to try things out. Yeah, it feels an awful lot more like a snowboard. This is really exciting. This is one of the reasons I wanted to prototype this board, because the shape works. Not only was I able to lock into the rails and execute turns, the nose floated. Anytime it started to sink down below the snow, and this was so cool, when it sunk down below the top of the snow and would come over the nose of the board, to just see it kind of like rise back up and then continue to float off down the hill. It was really, really exciting. So this prototype was a success. I suspect that if we had made this same shape with all of the techniques that you would bring to bear on a normal snowboard, that you would be able to ride it very well. So that's where we're going from here. The next move is I'm going to be doing some experiments with base material, and the next build is going to be a kind of a halfway point between the Powder Surfer in this video, super rudimentary, and a full-blown snowboard. It's going to have a base, it's going to have fiberglass, it's kind of going to have a profiled core. I'm going to put some really rudimentary binding inserts in it too, so that we can strap in, really get into those turns, and then we'll take it from there. So, you know, really exciting The outcome of this experiment is what gives me the information to go forward with those more complicated builds. And it's really just, it's so gratifying. It's so gratifying to have an idea in your head and to make that idea real and then to have it work the way that you're hoping. That's the best part. Man, it's the best thing in the world. You guys saw this was, again, not a very difficult build. Mixed with the mold set from the last video, you can get up and running in board building really quickly. If you want to try making some snowboards, this is all it takes to get started. So I hope it was entertaining. I hope you like coming along with me on this journey as I build things, but I also hope that it's kind of inspiring. It'd be super cool if any of you are going to get out and try to do some of this on your own. Please let me know. And then beyond that, like I said, I'm going to be demonstrating how to do some more complex builds as the season goes on. So subscribe to the channel, stick around. It's going to be really fun, and I'll see you soon.
Maybe next time.